Welcome to Language Swap, everyone, a fun way to learn English. We are so excited to have you join us today.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Alex.
And I'm Sally. And Alex, I have a feeling I know exactly what's on everyone's mind right now, including ours.
Oh, absolutely. It's impossible to ignore. The World Cup is happening right now, and honestly, the whole world feels a little different this month.
It really does. Streets are quieter during matches, people are wearing jerseys to work, and every conversation eventually turns into, "Did you see that game?"
So today we're doing something a little different. We're talking about the World Cup, the history of FIFA, some of the biggest controversies in football history, and we genuinely want to know what you think too.
The real story of football, how FIFA was born. We're covering where this all started, how many teams used to play, who's made it to finals over the years, the controversies people still argue about, and some fantastic vocabulary for talking about sports and forming opinions in English.
This episode is a little longer than usual because honestly, there's so much story here, and we didn't want to rush through any of it.
Let's start at the very beginning, because most people don't actually know where FIFA came from or why it even exists.
So picture this. It's the early 1900s, and football is spreading like wildfire across Europe. But here's the problem. Every country has its own rules, its own way of organizing matches, and there's no single authority connecting any of it.
Countries wanted to play each other internationally, but there was total chaos. No shared rulebook, no official body to organize anything. It was basically the Wild West of football.
So in 1904, representatives from 7 countries, France, Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, and Switzerland, met in Paris to fix this. And on May 21st, 1904, they officially founded FIFA, the Fédération Internationale de Football Association.
I love that the very first meeting happened in the back office of a sports organization in Paris. Nothing fancy, nothing dramatic, just a handful of passionate people who wanted football to have real structure.
A French journalist named Robert Guérin became the very first president of FIFA. Germany actually joined that same day too, by telegram, which is such a wonderfully old-fashioned detail.
By telegram. Can you imagine committing to something that historically important through a telegram? No email, no phone call, just a short formal message crossing borders to say, "Count us in."
It's such a great reminder of how different the world was, and yet the passion behind it feels exactly the same as it does today.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. England, the birthplace of modern football itself, actually rejected the idea of joining FIFA at first.
They eventually joined about a year later, but imagine that, the country most associated with the sport almost sat out the founding of its own governing body.
Sometimes the origin story of something huge is full of small, almost accidental decisions that could have gone completely differently.
Now, FIFA existed for years before there was ever a World Cup. The big tournament we all know today didn't come until 1930, more than 2 decades after FIFA itself was founded.
So who actually created the World Cup? This is where a French president named Jules Rimet enters the story, and he's honestly one of the most important figures in football history.
Rimet became FIFA's president in 1921, and he had this dream of creating an international tournament completely separate from the Olympics. At the time, football was only played at the Olympics as an amateur sport, and Rimet wanted something bigger, something that could include professional players and represent the entire world.
In 1930, his dream became real. The first ever FIFA World Cup was held in Uruguay.
And here's a detail that surprises a lot of people. Only 13 teams participated in that very first tournament. 13, compare that to the 48 teams competing in the tournament happening right now in 2026.
13 teams feels almost impossibly small today, but back then, just getting to Uruguay was a massive challenge. Several European teams had to cross the entire Atlantic Ocean by boat just to compete.
Can you imagine a multi-week boat journey just to play in a tournament? Athletes today complain about long flights, and that's completely valid, but the scale of commitment back then was on a totally different level.
And in that very first final, Uruguay played Argentina, and Uruguay won 4-2, becoming the first ever World Cup champions in football history.
Since then, the tournament has expanded again and again. From 13 teams to 16, then 24, then 32 for decades. And now 48 teams for the very first time in 2026.
This expansion is actually one of the biggest debates in football right now, and we're going to get into people's real opinions on that in just a bit.
Now let's talk about who's actually won this thing over the decades, because the list of champions tells such a fascinating story of football history.
Brazil holds the record with 5 World Cup titles. Germany and Italy each have 4. Argentina and France both have multiple titles as well, including Argentina's win in Qatar back in 2022.
And it's worth mentioning, the very first Jules Rimet trophy, named after that founding president we just talked about, was permanently given to Brazil in 1970 after their 3rd championship win.
And then, almost unbelievably, that trophy was stolen in Brazil years later and has never been recovered. It just disappeared completely.
That's such a wild piece of football history. An actual gold trophy representing the biggest sporting achievement in the world. Just gone, never found again.
Football history really does have these incredible, almost cinematic moments buried inside it that most casual fans have never even heard about.
Now, let's talk about controversies, because football and controversy have honestly gone hand in hand since the very beginning.
One of the biggest was the corruption scandal that exploded in 2015, when several high-ranking FIFA officials were arrested on charges involving bribery and fraud connected to hosting decisions and broadcasting deals.
It was such a massive story at the time. People genuinely questioned whether the organization behind the world's biggest sporting event could be trusted at all.
Another major controversy was the decision to award the 2022 World Cup to Qatar. People raised serious concerns about worker conditions during construction, the extreme summer heat, and whether the bidding process itself had been fair.
And now in 2026, there's a completely new controversy brewing, the tournament expanding to 48 teams. Some fans love it because more countries get a chance to compete on the world stage.
But other fans and analysts argue it dilutes the quality of the tournament, that too many mismatched teams make for less competitive, less exciting matches overall.
And that brings us to a question we genuinely want to ask you directly. What do you think about the tournament expanding to 48 teams? Is bigger really better here? Or does something get lost along the way?
We'd love to know your honest opinion on this, and we're going to give you some great vocabulary in a minute for expressing exactly that kind of opinion in English.
Now, let's bring this all the way to today, because this World Cup happening right now, in 2026, is genuinely historic in its own right.
For the very first time ever, 3 countries are co-hosting together. The United States, Canada, and Mexico. Matches are being played across all 3 nations simultaneously.
And, as we're recording this episode, the tournament has reached the semifinal stage. Argentina is set to face England and France is set to face Spain.
All 3 host nations, the US, Canada, and Mexico, were actually eliminated earlier in the tournament in the round of 16, which surprised a lot of fans who expected the home crowd advantage to carry them further.
There's actually a great phrase for that in English, home advantage. It refers to the belief that playing in your own country, in front of your own fans, gives a team a psychological and practical edge.
And in this case, that home advantage clearly wasn't enough for any of the 3 hosts, which is its own interesting story about how unpredictable this sport can be.
There's also been real conversation around ticket prices for this tournament. Some seats have reportedly gone for tens of thousands of dollars, which has sparked a lot of debate about who football is actually for anymore.
That's such an important part of the modern controversy around football. The sport started as something for everyone, played in the streets, completely accessible, and now some tickets cost more than a car payment.
It really does raise a bigger question about the direction the sport is heading in and whether the World Cup is drifting away from its roots as the people's game.
There's also been discussion around the political climate surrounding this tournament, given it's being hosted across 3 North American countries with a lot happening politically between them right now.
Sports and politics have honestly never been fully separate, no matter how much people wish they were. The World Cup has always been this strange mirror, reflecting whatever is happening in the world at that exact moment.
Even the pitch itself made headlines this year. There were reports about the exact specifications of the turf segments used across stadiums, which sounds small, but shows just how much scrutiny every detail receives at this level.
Now let's shift into vocabulary, because we've been telling this story, but there's so much rich English you can use to talk about sports, competition, and forming your own opinions.
Let's start with match vocabulary, underdog. This describes a team that isn't expected to win based on their ranking or history. Nobody expected them to win. They were total underdogs.
Upset. When a weaker team unexpectedly beats a stronger one, that result was a massive upset. Nobody saw it coming. related to underdog, but specifically about the surprising result itself.
Dark horse, a team that isn't the most talked about going into a tournament, but has a real chance of doing surprisingly well. Morocco was such a dark horse a few tournaments ago.
Nail biter, a match that's extremely close and tense, keeping everyone anxious until the very end. That game was a total nail biter. I couldn't even sit still.
Golden Generation, a group of exceptionally talented players from one country who all happened to be playing at the same time, creating unusually strong potential for that team. Spain had a golden generation a while back.
Extra time and penalty shootout. When a match ends tied, extra time is the additional period played to try to determine a winner. If it's still tied after that, it goes to a penalty shootout.
Comeback. When a team is losing badly but manages to turn the result around. That comeback in the second half was unbelievable, very dramatic, very satisfying to watch and to describe.
Heartbreak or heartbreaking loss, used constantly in football commentary for painful emotional defeats, especially in penalty shootouts or extremely close matches. It was heartbreaking to watch them lose like that.
Now, let's move into opinion vocabulary. Because half of loving football is actually arguing about football, and English has such great phrases for expressing your opinion respectfully.
In my opinion, is the most basic, but there are so many more natural ways to frame what you think. I'd argue that is a great one. I'd argue that expanding to 48 teams weakens the competition.
From my perspective, slightly softer, very natural. From my perspective, more countries getting a chance is a beautiful thing for the sport.
Some would say, or some people would argue, a great way to present an opinion you're aware exists, even if it's not entirely your own. Some would say the commercialization has gone too far.
I see both sides. Extremely useful phrase for showing you understand an argument even if you lean one way. I see both sides. Honestly, there are good points either way.
It's a matter of perspective, a very diplomatic way to acknowledge that reasonable people disagree without picking a side directly. Whether expansion is good or bad is really a matter of perspective.
Die-hard fan. Someone who is extremely deeply devoted to their team, no matter what happens. He's such a die-hard fan, he's never missed a World Cup in his life.
These phrases are so useful beyond football, too. Anytime you want to share an opinion in English while sounding thoughtful and open, rather than aggressive or closed-minded, these work perfectly.
One more really useful one. At the end of the day, we touched on this phrase in an earlier episode, but it fits perfectly here too. At the end of the day, it's still the most watched sporting event on the planet, whatever people's complaints are.
That said, a great connector for adding a balancing thought after making a point. The ticket prices are honestly outrageous. That said, the atmosphere in the stadiums has been incredible.
It comes down to useful for identifying the core of an issue. Whether you love or hate the new format, it really comes down to what you personally value in a tournament, inclusivity or intensity.
So here's our genuine question for you as you're listening. What's your take on the 48-team format? Do you think it's the right direction for the tournament, or were things better with fewer, more competitive teams?
And beyond that, what's the most heartbreaking or unforgettable World Cup moment you personally remember watching? We would love to know.
And one more question, genuinely. How do you feel about ticket prices and commercialization in general? Does it bother you, or do you see it as just the natural cost of something this big and this popular?
All right, let's do our word tour for today, covering the huge amount of vocabulary from this episode.
Underdog, a team not expected to win. Upset, a surprising result where the weaker team wins. Dark horse, an unexpected contender with real potential. Nail biter, an extremely tense, close match. Golden generation, an unusually talented group of players from one era.
Extra time and penalty shootout, ways of deciding a match that ends tied. Comeback, turning around a losing result. Heartbreak or heartbreaking loss, a painful emotional defeat.
Home advantage, the edge a team gets from playing in their own country.
For opinions, I'd argue that, from my perspective, some would say, I see both sides and it's a matter of perspective. All natural, respectful ways to share what you think.
At the end of the day, a grounding phrase for the bigger picture. That said, a connector for balancing a point, it comes down to, for identifying the real core of a debate.
Die-hard fan, someone deeply devoted to their team no matter what. Your challenge this week? Pick one football opinion, maybe about the 48-team format, or your favorite World Cup memory, and practice saying it out loud using at least 2 of today's opinion phrases.
Whether you love football or you're completely new to it, this vocabulary works for literally any passionate debate in English, sports, or otherwise.
If this episode got you thinking, or if you have strong feelings about anything we talked about today, we'd genuinely love to hear from you. And sharing this episode with a fellow football fan would mean the world to us.
Thanks so much for listening, everyone.
Enjoy the rest of the tournament, and we'll see you in the next episode.